Hero Realty, entrepreneurship across eras, in association with CNBC TV18.
Members of Pune International Center, enthusiastic attendees from Pune, a very warm welcome and good afternoon to one and all. We all have gathered here for this wonderful launch of Marathi edition of an extremely popular book, The Making of Hero. This book is written by Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, son of Mr. Brijmohan Lall Munjal, who takes us through a wonderful journey of his father and his brothers to build a vast empire of Hero Cycles, Hero Motorcorp and Hero Enterprise. This book goes deep inside the family spirit that brought employees, customers, channel partners, suppliers, local communities together to create success, welfare and well-being for millions over the past multiple decades. May I now request our esteemed dignitaries to come up on the dais, please. Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, Dr. Abhay Firodia, Mr. Sunil Bajaj, Ms. Namita Thapar. I request all the dignitaries to inaugurate an unveiling of the book, please. I would now request Mr. Parikshit to take over, please.
Today, what we're talking is about some of the entrepreneurial experiences we're drawing from the legacy of Dr. Brijmohan Lall Munjal, entrepreneurship then and now, what's changed, what's not. Mr. Munjal, I'll begin with you. Tell us what worked for him. When it comes to defining his entrepreneurial fundamentals, how would you define it?
When you lose everything, you have a point to prove to yourselves first and then to anybody else. But you also need to be able to provide for your family. So I think part of this was the drive to restart from scratch and build something. The other thing I think that worked for him was very sound but very simple principles. The founding principles of the family, because the business started with just two brothers and then the third one, then the fourth one, were the principles and the behavior of just the brothers, and that became the company's culture. In the early days, it was natural because it was a small number. As it grew, we kind of organized that into philosophical statements, and any new person who was being hired would actually be interviewed against that criteria, and then it became part of the induction document as well. First, that the most important asset that we have is people. It is also the only asset which appreciates with time and experience. The second is building and retaining relationships. As you mentioned yourself, they built some pretty unique relationships right from the early days. We have many organizations and families who are now working with us second, third, and even fourth generation. And I think there is something to be said for that, especially in a world where we try and make short order of everything quickly and move on to the next thing. The next was fairness, to try and be fair to all concerned all the time. And I can tell you, this is an easy statement to make. It's not always easy to do. Because when you try and push this, even within the organization, sometimes people say, why do we have to be fair to the other guy? We are actually dealing with him. So why is it necessary? The next one was care and concern for the environment on two types. One was the physical environment. So things which have become fashionable today, like sustainability, etc., were practiced very early on. 40 years ago or 45 years ago, we had put effluent treatment plants, and I'm going back to the Hero Cycles days now, and putting green plants inside and outside the factories. Second was the environment of communities living and working around us. So a lot of work got done right from the get-go, from the early days, with people around us, really as a way to say thank you, realizing how fortunate we were to have got these opportunities. So this is the least you can do is reach out to others. And the last, I think, in some ways, which was the most important, was he and his brothers did all of this with humility, with the acceptance that no one of us has a monopoly on good ideas and the ability to create anything on our own. That it's always going to be the entire team that's working. which is why the word family and parivar was used over and over and over again.
Mr. Firodia, I'd like to come to you. Those times were really different. There was no access to technology. There was license Raj. There was a long waiting period for everything. What were those times like? How was it to be an entrepreneur at that time?
The entrepreneurs of that time had to struggle with a hostile government, with scarcity of raw material, with evolving very militant unions, and the fragility of the business was great. So that was the condition. In the bicycle industry, the structure is very special. Everybody makes a part. Somebody makes a rim, somebody makes a spoke, somebody makes an axle, and the aggregators aggregate this. What Mr. Munjal did, what Brijmohan Lall Munjal did, was to nurture this industry, to build relations, so they were able to build scale, because there were 5 axle manufacturers and 6 rim manufacturers. So they could build scale. So the focus shifted from having to deal with technology for small volumes to dealing with large volumes with distributed manufacturing. And this was something which was a special quality of Mr. Munjal. His having done that in Hero Cycles, he was able to understand the dynamics of building scale. And he built it. And you saw what happened to Hero Honda at that time. So the important thing was that he was able to take people together, build scale, without really getting into too much trouble by way of investment. The special skills that I saw he had, I think were extraordinarily important. 2 things. Motorcycles is the future, not scooters. And second, build scale in the most efficient manner you can.
Sanjeev, if I can get you in, your father always called Brijmohan Lall Munjal his guru. What were some of the entrepreneurial lessons that you picked up from Mr. Brijmohan Lall Munjal, or your father wanted to replicate in his business?
I met Brijmohan Lalji a few times. The first time I met him, I went gingerly. My father introduced me to him. Like with an elderly person, you would bend and offer your pranam. But he hugged me, and he hugged me as though he was not hugging a stranger. And I think that was the character of the person. And that's why you see through the book also, relationship comes before everything else for him and for the family. Whether it is from Kamalia to Amritsar or to Ludhiana, or it is from Sikar to Wardha to Mumbai and Pune, there are 2 parallel stories. As I was reading through that story and whatever little bit I know of the Bajaj history before me and from the time that I've been here, you felt like these were 2 parallel lives. And while a lot was different, a lot was similar. The entrepreneurial zeal was similar, the ambition was similar, the family relationships were similar, how people work together, how you institutionalized institutions, how you focused on excellence, how you focused on scale, and in this case, very similar industries. And even today, if you see, while the auto industry is predominant, actually over here now financial services is a little bigger, but that's only a phase in time. The great thing is that the entrepreneurial zeal, that risk-taking ability, is what stood out very clearly in those times. But I also believe that for entrepreneurs today, there is so much more that today's world offers you. Look at the access to capital, alternate forms of capital, and Sunil is one who plays a significant role in the entire startup world in India, is with people like him and with so many other private equity venture capital groups, an entrepreneur today, and you can see that with so many examples around us, can build a top-class company. Earlier, either you were part of a larger family, you were associated with a multinational, or you waited months and months outside a bank branch to get a loan. So I think access to capital has made a very big difference. Second is just the availability of professional guidance. That's making a very big difference. Otherwise, earlier, you went into the family, and of course, you learned a lot from the family. But I think there's a lot more that is happening today professionally, And I would also point out one more thing, that in the past, you started a business in your city, whether it was in Amritsar, whether it was Ludhiana, whether it was in Pune, and you grew over a period of time. Today, you can see these startups within 3 years are all over the country, if not all over the world. So the global access also, and maybe a little bit the digital world as a result of that, has dramatically changed the entrepreneurial opportunity today. And that's why even in our own work environments, we try to create that environment where for at least our top 20% of employees, they work in an environment which is as entrepreneurial as can be.
Namita, you've heard everyone. What do you think entrepreneurs of today really need to do? Do you feel that there is something that is lacking in entrepreneurs of today, something that they can learn from the likes of Brijmohan Lall Munjal, Mr. Firodia, Rahul Bajaj?
Some things that are the same is what we just spoke about right now. Mr. Munjal spoke about grit and just that perseverance. When you speak to my father, who's a first-generation entrepreneur, he'll say, my life story is just a story full of failures. So how do you deal with that amount of failure and still have that grit? You spoke about people, right? And how relationships are so critical. So, I mean, some of these skills that we see in, your father or Mr. Rahul or my father or even the youngsters who are as young as in their early 20s who come to Shark Tank, those fundamentals don't change. Those are some essentials that you need a founder to have. Again, the fundamentals about, the basics of a business, path to profitability. That's where the Terra is a big question mark, because the access to funding wasn't as easy in the generations prior as it is today. And that access to funding creates its own set of opportunities, which are phenomenal because it's democratized entrepreneurship, right? It's not the prerogative of a family business. Even the common man, woman can dream big. So the funding has been a huge opportunity, but it's been a huge challenge because we are seeing some insane valuations with some terrible losses, cash flow constraints. And I think the funding winter that has been going on for the last 2 years is truly a reality check. Let's get back to the basics. Let's focus not just on the crazy growth numbers, but also on the cash flow, the profitability. So I think if I were to summarize on what's not changed are the fundamentals that an entrepreneur needs to have in terms of skills. What's changed is the access to capital. What's changed is, like he rightly said, better policy in place. You have UPI. I mean, look at the kind of digital gateways. I don't remember paying with Google Pay or going and using those QR codes. It was a kind of learning for me. I felt so ignorant and technically illiterate just doing that. And that's, again, changed the entire startup ecosystem. But one area that I find very funny, and because all of us here are from family businesses, is that family businesses still make up 70% of our GDP. And we're the third largest country when it comes to family business. But when you look at those family businesses, Sanjeev made a very good point that you really need to bring the professionals in. He's done a good job of having professional CEOs in place, which did not happen in the past, right? You really have to bring in those systems, the scale. One of the points you brought about is the roles and responsibilities were clear in the four brothers. But I see a lot of family businesses today where that's not prevalent. The succession planning, clear roles and responsibilities, governance, the board meetings not just being a checklist, the professional and family member balance, that is still a big gap in a lot of businesses. So I think that is a big area that needs to change. A second area that needs to change is, I know Sanjeev does a lot of digital stuff in his companies because we talk a lot. Aether, that's all about investing in startups to really get ahead. At MCure, we've invested in a lot of startups to bring prickless testing for anemia or to bring a pocket-size ECG device so that it becomes affordable in the interiors. But not a lot of family businesses are really adopting startups and technology at the pace that they need to.
Hero Realty, entrepreneurship across eras, in association with CNBC TV18. Hero Realty, Entrepreneurship across eras in association with CNBC TV18.
What is the future or the mantra for the success of a family business today?
One is the distinction between ownership and management. That is critical. If you just realize that my value and wealth lies in my business, so if there's somebody who can run this business better than me or my brother or my kid or my daughter, that's what you should be doing. I think that's one fundamental value of business which is getting lost somewhere, because the impression very often is, if you have the same last name as mine, you are entitled to this. And that entitlement is a very dangerous term. It sets the wrong set of expectations. So we are not really demanding performance, and merit then gets given the go-by. Second is, as family businesses grow, it's important the philosophy of the family needs to be transmitted as a culture of the organization. Otherwise, you're at odds with each other. Because as it happens, a family and business are an oxymoron. Families are socialist by their very nature. They want everyone to be treated similarly and equally. Whereas the business is completely capitalist, as it should be. It's focusing on improving efficiency, profits, but it's also important, and I think this is an important compact between business, industry, and civil society that needs to change. It needs to play a bigger role outside of itself than it's been playing over the last 100 years, I think. Businesses have learned how to create efficiency, how to build productivity, how to get good outcomes based on whatever other resources available. And I think to deploy that knowledge in the social sector is also very important, because the normal understanding is social sector does not need to be efficient. And I think that's not fair to the sector. It's not fair to society. So the role of business, I think, is beyond business as well.
Mr. Firodia, coming to you, when do you think an entrepreneur should take a decision that he now needs to step aside to give somebody else a role for the future? And when it comes to family-owned businesses, what is the difference between, say, 50 to 60 years ago and now as to how a family-run business should really function, and when should you really hand over to a professional CEO?
Let me say, one of the ways to keep the family business healthy is to keep the family small. That is something which is very important. And family doesn't mean just the number of children you have. Family means an extended family. In India, your cousin is family, your cousin's brother-in-law is your family. And one has to be clear about this, that yes, when you are in business, the stake in the business should remain limited to a few people, and not very widely spread, unless they are normal shareholders. That's perfectly kosher. Second point is the value system. Why is the Indian business community successful? I mean, you see this all over the world. In America, in Europe, Indians are heading businesses. And I think there are three very important elements to this: education, enterprise, and ethics. If you can combine the three, then you have a very solid, successful, potential configuration to play with. Now, how do you inculcate ethics? And this is where you look at some of the leaders who have created big enterprises out of very small beginnings, like Mr. Munjal. They have set the example of ethics for the relationships in the family, for attributing the benefits of the success, for giving power. And it is a combination of these three that makes the family business successful.
When it comes to women entrepreneurs especially, how difficult has been that journey towards diversity, also making your voice heard in the boardroom? What's your advice to women entrepreneurs who are just starting off?
If you look at entrepreneurs and you look globally, this is not just in India, only 2.3% of female-led founders get funded. Now, it can be a whole different discussion on why, and I've done a lot of research, so we will not get into that depth. But obviously, if these are the kind of numbers we're talking about, and I'm a healthcare company, World Economic Forum did a survey of 156 countries, and India was 154th, bottom 2 in women's health. There is a need for a lot of women like me to speak up. And Mr. Munjal was telling me there's some communication consultants who train you on how to deal with being tactful and deal with difficult people.
People you don't like.
But I think there's a whole different training that's needed for women to really lean in, to speak up, to normalize taboos.
Yeah, but this is an important point.
So that is important.
It's an important point you've raised, Parikshit. And in our investment office that Sanjeev referred to, we see 80 to 100 deals a month. And we actually make an extra effort to find where you can find female entrepreneurs. And we have actually even gone and put money in funds, which we don't like to do nowadays, which are women-focused funds. One of the things that needs to happen is to involve or get women into the mainstream because they are the much smarter half. The reality is their ability to do multitasking is much better than men, and their ability to bring empathy to any task is much better than men. So at this moment, I think we are missing out. We are actually shooting ourselves in the foot. This is our next big wave of growth for India as more and more females come into the mainstream, into key positions and key roles in economy and in the industry.
Mr. Bajaj, my final question to you. Many startups have had a very hard time. Many have closed down also after COVID-19. Many of the product models did not really work. And we saw in the book that Mr. Sunil Kant has written about Brijmohan Lall Munjal, how there were brothers who used to travel in third class, who used to live in very small hotels just to make sure that they save up on costs. Now, those might be very, very extreme cases, might be individual choices. But how important is cost efficiency and frugality in times that we live in today, especially when you're starting off in a business?
It is something that's important at every time, every part of the journey of building a business, because every rupee that you save goes either to your customer, to your employee, or to the shareholder. And companies that are successful for the long term are all frugal companies. You may see an Infosys, you may see an Amazon. These are huge companies, but they're exceedingly frugal. And by being frugal does not mean being silly. It is intelligently removing waste. The whole Japanese system of lean manufacturing was about removing waste from each part of the manufacturing process. So this is something that I believe this is something our startups understand. The challenge that they're facing is that there is a dark side to private equity, it's structural in the model, which is that equity, that money eventually belongs to a set of investors who want their money back in a defined period of time. And in that period of time, when you have a venture capital or a private equity investor that is funding 20, 30, 40, 50 companies, he or she knows that every one of them is not going to be successful. So the few that they see can be successful, they chase size so that they can take it to a particular valuation, exit, and make money for their investors. Unfortunately, what that does is brings a whole additional set of pressures on the founder who may not have the capability of building a business out as fast, may not have the management systems, is not able to build a profitable model. And that's what you're seeing at the negative result of that is what you're seeing at this point of time.
Right. No, thank you. And I'm sure this is a masterclass for all entrepreneurs wanting to start off. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you very much, Namita, Mr. Firodia, Mr. Munjal, and Mr. Bajaj.
I would request Mr. Sunil Munjal to be available for signing. People may want your signature on the book.
Hero Realty, entrepreneurship across eras, in association with CNBC TV18.